Welcome to the Executives Lounge. This is your podcast host, Christine Fauner. I am bringing you amazing stories from amazing women in leadership from across the globe. Let's get started. All right. Hello, podcast listeners. I'm here today with Veronica Weedon. She's coming to us from Zurich, Switzerland, and I'm excited to bring her to you. She is the founder of Revival Health, and she's a holistic health coach, rapid transformation therapy practitioner, and hypnotherapist. She has a practice that helps people move forward towards healthier relationships and a better life. So I'm going to talk to Veronica today about her own healing journey and how now she's using that healing journey to really help her clients. Now, Veronica, I just want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Christine. I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, one of the things that I talk about a lot on this show is really that professional practice and leadership practice is really grounded in our mental, physical, spiritual selves. It's grounded in the past, present, future. It's grounded in knowing who we are as personal and professional people. How does this concept resonate with you as a holistic healer, as a person who has started a business on really trying to walk people through their own transformation?
I think, when a long time ago, and when I was in the corporate world, I really saw myself as two people. I saw the professional me and then the private me. And as I've gone through my own journey, I believe more and more that there's no separation between the two. I don't like to use the word should, but you should. It's more you can't really. If you're going to show up authentically, then that's you and all of you wherever you are in all the contexts. And I struggled actually for quite a while merging what I considered those two personas. I was like, oh, well, I can't show this there and I can't do that here. And really, it just led me to bump up against a bunch of roadblocks. And the more I embraced just saying, okay, well, this is it. And these are all the parts of me, then people either resonate with that or they don't. And that's a good thing, because whether you're working for a big corporate or like me, have your own practice and sort of working alone, attracting clients, people buy from people. It's one of the first rules of sales. And so if they don't resonate with me or any of my story, they're not going to come to me. And that's a good thing for me, because at the end of the day, I'll be able to best help the people where there's a connection, because it's all about relationships across our lives, isn't it?
It is. When I started this podcast, it was really kind of in the dichotomy of my PhD work, which is, focusing on the impacts of toxic leadership on women in leadership. And the flip of that was really meeting all these amazing women and wanting to share these amazing stories. And in that process, it's been a surprise to me, maybe because I take my own knowledge of what leadership is for granted sometimes, how this podcast has started redefining what leadership really is to us. And from, C-suite executives to entrepreneurs like ourselves, we are recognizing that the traditional structure of what leadership is and how to be a leader doesn't really resonate with us. And I'd like you to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so to your point of, toxic environments, I definitely have my fair share of experience, or had my fair share of experience with that, both in my professional and personal life. And that was actually being in very toxic relationships across the board was what sent me down a spiral, which ultimately led me to hit rock bottom and was my turning point, per se, when I started on a healing journey for myself. And that's what ultimately led me to the work I do today. And I'm still evolving. I don't think there's a beginning and an end point of this journey. I truly believe that we're lifelong learners, and I'm very conscious of that. And I love learning new aspects and new things now. And I think we're always evolving, and that's kind of the point to life, right?
Recognizing that our expertise in certain areas is transferable to other areas. You mentioned that you came from more of a traditional corporate space, and you're like, well, I'm going to go out on this entrepreneurial endeavor because that resonates more of how I can serve others, how I can step into my impact and influence for the greater good, something that really you care about and aligns to who you are as a full human being. Tell me about how you kind of shifted into being the practitioner that you are and what that really means. Because I'm not sure in your introduction if all of our listeners know what you are, and I'd love
What
to
I
hear
do.
it. What are you? Yeah.
But in terms of what I do, yeah. So if we'd met 10 years ago, it would have been a completely different person. And you talked a lot about what our story is and the story we tell ourselves. And I'd like to tap into that a little bit too, because so much of our reality is the story we tell ourselves. So it's not necessarily the events in our life that happen, it's our interpretation of those events. So we create stories based on external factors and then bring those stories to life, essentially, because our thoughts, a belief is just a thought you think over and over again. And the more where we place our attention, we place our energy.
I keep saying I think imposter syndrome is total bullshit. It's not real. To me, it's fearful people trying to convince you to be fearful of what's possible for yourself. It makes me think of that if we really sat with ourselves, we could recognize the love and beauty and amazingness of who we are as humans. But with all these external factors that keep coming in and experiences, obviously, right? Like we lose that voice of self, I think, sometimes.
I think, to your point, is it real or not? Well, it's real if you believe it is. Then it becomes your reality.
Right.
So let's take an example. Someone has to go give a public speech, get on stage and give a speech. And they think to themselves, oh my God, I can't do this. I've never done this before. I'm just going to be rubbish. It's going to be awful. It's going to be, I'm going to forget everything I'm supposed to say. It's going to be terrible. And before you know it, there's the physical reaction, right? They start to sweat. They probably go all red. Their heart starts to race. They go into half a panic attack. It's not pretty. And on stage, in fact, they forget half of what they were going to say, and it is a total disaster. They come off stage and go, see, I knew I was going to be horrible, and they reinforce that belief. The mind and the body doesn't know the difference between nervousness and excitement. To the body, it's the same. So whatever it is you're feeling, if you think and if you tell yourself, oh, I'm actually really excited about this, then that's a lot more likely to become your reality. So is it real or not? It's real if you believe it's real. But to the point of where does it come from, 95% of how we operate and move through life is driven by our subconscious. We're not even aware of it. And this is how we create patterns and habits and beliefs. And the beliefs that are harmful to us, whether we know it or not, in fact, pretty much all beliefs generally originate in childhood. And so this is part to your point of, how do I work with people? This is where the hypnotherapy comes in, because we actually tap into your subconscious and go back to find the root cause of why you have a certain pattern or behavior. So if it is stage fright, just take that, for example, or fear of heights, or it doesn't really matter what, you can do it with pretty much anything. Then we go back in your subconscious to go and find the how, why, when, and where that was created, because there's a belief behind that. And it's about sort of helping people take an objective look at their subjective self. Because at a child, we don't develop logic until we're between 7 and 9 years old. So those first 7 to 9 years of life, for all of us, we're living in an emotional state through our emotions. And then as we grow up, logic comes in and we distance ourselves more and more from our emotions. But it's in fact our emotions that are innate, built-in guidance system that tells us how aligned we are to our inner being, if you will.
Making me think of actually the first podcast episode we did here, which was called The Power of Language. And so you're making me think of the power of words, right? That when we're telling ourselves or others things and we're using words to develop our stories, it makes you think of how powerful those words are when you can create realities with words.
Yeah, 100%. And the most important words are the ones you tell yourself.
Right.
Because if you think about it, someone can insult you or, say something negative about you once, but then generally it's us who repeat that story again and again, for decades afterwards.
Mhm.
And that becomes our reality, and it's all we see. And again, I come back to our focus, or where we place our attention, we place our energy.
Well, I would love for you to kind of step into, speaking of the power of words and developing our own stories, really kind of share a little bit of your story with us, of where you are right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I started Revival Health a few years ago, and it has evolved as I have evolved. So because of what took me to rock bottom, essentially, and then the first thing, I was just so unwell on every level, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And that's why I'm such a big believer in holistic health and the mind, body, spirit connection, because one doesn't exist without the other. So if you're physically stronger, it will help you become mentally and emotionally stronger as well, and vice versa. So it all works in collaboration with each other. And my road sort of downhill was I got very physically ill and nobody could explain why. Looking back, and after all the work I've done, it makes so much sense. It's completely logical why the mental issues and the emotional issues I had, why it manifested physically the way it did. And so that's when I went to study health coaching. And that took me a certain part of the way because I just needed to get physically healthy again. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe I can start a business with this health coaching. Because what's funny is, whilst I worked in the corporate world, and I also worked in nonprofits and for mid-sized companies, I sort of saw the spectrum across a few different industries. But from when I was really young, I always knew I wanted to work for myself. I had no idea doing what or how, why, when, or where, but somehow I just knew I didn't want to work for someone my entire life, but I did throughout my career. And then as this happened, I thought, well, maybe this is a way I can start working for myself. Maybe this can happen. Revival Health is changing with me. And yeah, when I started, I was very focused on toxic relationships and educating people around that. What does it mean? Where does it come from? And now I've really moved far beyond that because I'm so conscious of my own vibration and where I want to put my attention and energy. And I don't want to do that on toxic relationships anymore. So it's all about how can we move towards healthier relationships.
You make a good point about kind of building business, that over time it will evolve just right alongside you. The two things that the women in this community always say, or there's a common theme, and there's a sense of something is not right. And for some, it might be a work-life balance. It might be that they're not embracing their whole selves all the time, and that's not aligned to kind of how you are as a human. And they're feeling that sense of like, something's not right.
Mm.
Or how do you engage in that evolution of self without judgment?
Yeah. So, for so many years, I was looking for my purpose in life. I was like, I don't know what it is. And everyone's, there was a phase where find your purpose, find your purpose. And every business book was talking about it. Everyone was talking about it, find your purpose. And I just never had a clue. And as I've gone through this process, I've understood that we actually all have the same purpose in life. Everybody on this planet has the same purpose in life. And that's to find joy. It's to be happy. It's what everyone wants. And that is our purpose. It is to be happy. How you get there is a different thing. So to answer your question, if you feel like something is missing or you're out of alignment or you're not happy in that moment, then I'm going to go back to the energy, because we all emit a vibrational frequency, and the law of attraction states that what we emit, we attract back. So we're everything around us is essentially reflecting our inner world. And so the smallest step you can take really is to find something small that brings you joy, whether that's petting your dog or going for a walk or watching a sunrise. Focus on that. Find that on a daily basis And it depends where you are, if you want to call it a spectrum. Is your life, it's like you've been miserable for so long, you're on the verge of depression, or it's just, no, it's, everything's kind of good, but there's just something, because I often compare it to a moving freight train. If you've been going in one direction for so long and the freight train's going at 100 miles per hour, you can't pull it in the other direction immediately. It just doesn't work, and it won't end well for everybody in the train. You have to slow it down before you can start to reverse the direction. So depending on where you are emotionally, you might look to just slow down that freight train going in the direction you don't want it to go before you can reverse it. If it's already slow and you just need to move it, then it's different. Find a way to quiet your mind. So whether that's just sitting in a room listening to the sound of the air conditioner, we usually have a dominant sense. Mine is my smell. For some, it's hearing. For some, it's, but we usually have a dominant sense. So whatever your dominant sense is, try to engage that and focus it on something, anything. Doesn't matter what it is. It can be the spot on the wall. It doesn't matter. Just to quiet your mind, because then it's like it brings you back to a neutral level.
I love the train analogy. That's a really great way to think about where we're at versus where we want to go, and how you can't just, there's got to be a process there, and you have to acknowledge where you are.
Yeah,
first.
like if someone's really sick and dying of cancer, you can't say, be happy and find joy. It just, it's too far removed from where they are at this point that it's just not realistic. It'll probably make them want to punch you in the face, and rightly so. But they can look out the window or stroke their pet, and find some joy in that. So you're slowing the freight train before you can begin to reverse it. So no matter where you are, there is something that you can find or focus on for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever.
Well, and this is making me think of the intentionality around practice. To truly be an expert and really highly engaged in what expertise really looks like, we have to really be intentional about that practice. And so how do you make that an active part of your life? How do you adopt that into your day, rather than saying, I don't feel right and I'm going to keep not feeling right? You're going to say, well, I don't feel right. What's an intentional practice I could try? I really like that.
Yeah, it's funny, most people want change of some kind, but very few people are willing to change. And to change, you need a clear intention, like you say, with an elevated emotion. So you need to know your why. Why do you want to change? And why do we want anything? Because of how we believe it will make us feel, right? Why do you want a promotion? Because it'll make you feel more successful, because it'll make you feel more secure, because you'll get more money, because it'll give you more. Like, why do we want anything in life? Because of how we believe it will make us feel. And so the key, the trick, is to tap into that feeling the reality has manifested. Because coming back to energy, everything is energy. We're all vibrating at certain frequencies. And negative emotions carry low frequencies, and joy and gratitude and hopefulness and carry much higher vibrations. And so the trick is really to get into that feeling, to feel the feeling you want to feel before the physical reality has manifested.
Oh, I really love that. Yes, it makes me excited just thinking about it. I was just thinking, I feel like sometimes we get really wound up and wrapped up in kind of the structural aspects of our society and the way we operate in it. It's just too simple to say, well, I'd love to walk out on stage with a full audience. This is mine, right? Like, I'd love to walk out on stage with a full audience and have a great time with them for an hour. Like, it would just be joyful. It'd be fun. It'd make me laugh. It would make me dance. Like, it's hard to believe sometimes that that's a big enough reason.
Well, it's funny. You see, you use the language, it's hard to believe. So then my question is, why is it hard for you to believe that, right? And then you backtrack. Okay, well, where does that belief come from? Now, it's not like we're living in la la land, right? If you have a presentation on a very specific topic, obviously you have to know what you're talking about. You can't go in ignorant. There's preparation and all these things, but assuming you know what you're talking about, where does that belief come from? And it could come from someone told you once that you couldn't do it, or you had a bad experience once, and that's the story you've been repeating
And this is making
yourself.
me kind of circle back to what you believe is our purpose in life, which is
Yeah,
similar to what I believe, which is it's
yeah,
just to be joyful.
yeah, yeah,
Find fun and love and joy and
yeah,
enjoy it. It's such a small
yeah,
amount of time we have here.
yeah.
But this is an example of mine, right? It's hard to believe that that's the only reason. That's the purpose.
And again, I want to be clear. It's not about living in La La Land like we're meant to, fly around on unicorns all day and just be joyful. It's the purpose is to be joyful, but how people get joy is different for everybody. For some people, that may be climbing the corporate ladder, getting on the cover of Forbes magazine, and that's their joy. It doesn't mean sitting around doing nothing and just being happy. It's just what makes someone happy is different for everybody. And so it's about finding out, well, what is your path to joy? What does that look like for you? And then comes the cliched saying of love what you do and you'll never work a day in your life. But there's something to that, isn't there? So it doesn't mean don't work. It's just be joyful, right? Find joy. Because isn't
Right.
that what we all want?
It is the
From
hope.
everything in life. We want joy in our personal life. We want joy with kids and with our work and with our family and with our partner and with our animal. Don't we just seek joy everywhere? Isn't that the point?
Right.
I guess the thing I would like to share for any skeptics out there, when I talk about law of attraction, because for some people it can really just sound woo-woo, but actually it's physics. Because Einstein, Tesla, it's been talked about for the most famous physicists in the world talked about this. It's not new information that everything is energy around us. And in this three-dimensional world that we live in, we experience reality through our senses. That's the difference with this 3D world is we have our senses and physical matter. But if you think, we are made up of atoms. And atoms are 99.9% information and nothing that you can perceive with your senses. So, the nucleus is the mass essentially of the atom, but that's less than 0.1% of the atom. So if you look at it from a physics point of view, we are 99.9% information and nothing we can perceive with our senses. And therefore, our reality is less than 0.1%. So there must be so much more that we can't perceive through our senses. It's physics.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, we could talk about the fifth dimension and all these.
Oh man, we could go into a whole nother podcast episode right now. People who are fearful or dismissive of what we're talking about here really are refusing to look at the science. I feel like when you go into learning the science of physics and the science of energy, when you go into it with an open mind and you go into it with curiosity, there's so many things that we have learned that'll blow your mind. There's so much unknown, and that's scary.
Yeah. I not only believe it because of physics, but I've actually experienced the fifth dimension, and I just published an article about it. So it's this week. It's what it felt like to be in the fifth dimension. I know it's real because I've lived it, but I understand that lots of people haven't. Really, there are a few fears that everyone carries to a certain extent. It's the fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment. Everything kind of boils down to those if you really take off the layers. It really is non-judgment, because change is not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. But that means, like I said at the beginning, our emotions are our internal guidance system of how aligned we are with our inner being. And if someone's living in fear, we've all experienced it, and I think everybody would agree it's not a great place to live. So it just begs the question, well, you can deny and you can argue, but ultimately nobody else is living your life. You are. So we all have to decide for ourselves what do we want and what are we willing to do for it? And sometimes giving up those beliefs, and sometimes it means giving up people, that have been around for a long time. And that's why it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. We all have to choose. It's about accepting that we create our own reality. And if you can acknowledge that, accept that, then that's the start.
I love that. Veronica, I just want to thank you so much for being here today and having this really meaningful conversation with me. These are the conversations that really make me feel like we are truly redefining what leadership is, one story at a time. And the more we share in these conversations, the more we start understanding ourselves and the world around us.
And thank you so much. I've really enjoyed being here and talking to you. And I hope it resonates with the audience and that it's helpful in some way, shape, or form.
Thanks for joining us today in the Executives Lounge, where we bust open the doors, slam through the ceilings, and make sure that we have a spot at the table and that we are the lounge. You can find more podcast recordings and episodes at www.roamyoursoul.com. That's ROAM, roaming the world, finding amazing stories from amazing women, sharing their leadership skills and talents with us all over the globe.